And as we sit tall with the eyes closed, once again connect with the breath. And as you breathe in, acknowledge to yourself that you're receiving a gift. And as you breathe out, acknowledge to yourself that you have the opportunity to share that gift, to share the grace, the peace, the love, the compassion, the presence, all of it. Breathing in and breathing out, let the flow of that breath be the purpose, the balance, and the inspiration in your life. My Guruji would say, never let a single breath enter or leave your body without your complete awareness. And now I share that with you. Never let a single breath enter or leave your body without your complete awareness. And draw the hands together in front of the heart. And we'll lift our voices in one Om, followed by the invocation mantras. If you know them, please join. Taking a breath in. Om. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Ganana Andhva Ganapati Gum Havamahe Kavin Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jyestarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata Anashrinvanu Siddha Sadhanam Mahaganapataye Namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhir Vajinivati Dhinama Vitriyavatu Ano Divo Brahataf Parvata Da Saraswati Ajata Gantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Jujushana Gritachi Shagmam Novacha Mushati Shrinotu Vagdevyai Namaha. Resting the hands down and fluttering the eyes open. Such a blessing to see you all today. Oh, what shall we talk about? Is there anything you want to talk about?
Anger.
Anger. Okay. That's anger. Okay. So to start off a conversation about anger, let's start with connection. What's the why? What's the relationship there? How connected do you feel in your life? How connected do you feel to your own self, to your soul, to your own willpower, to your own vision, to your own inspiration? How connected do you feel? I'm not asking you how connected others make you feel. I'm asking you how connected you allow yourself to feel. Do you take the time outside of here to connect with the breath, to put the right hand on the heart, left hand on the belly, and feel the inhale and the exhale, and to verbally remind yourself the inhale is a gift, the exhale is the offering. The inhale is the contract. It's the contract. It's the Divine Mother saying, here's your contract for life. I'm giving you this breath now. And the exhale is your signature on the sign line and your expression of fulfillment of the contract. And it's a contract that's ongoing with every inhalation and every exhalation. It's a constant conversation that you're having with yourself, with the mother, But how connected do you feel to that? Are you even aware that that conversation is happening? How connected do you allow yourself to be to your own vision of life? And I'm not talking about the billboards and the magazines and how when you're driving down the street and it's almost spring and the billboard is like, some fancy person in some fancy outfit, with a fancy drink on a fancy boat. And you're like, oh, that would be my vision of life. No, it's not. That is an impression that was just implanted into your mind to brainwash you into becoming a good consumer. That is not your vision of life. How connected are you to your vision of life? Not your partner's, not your child, not your friend, not your parent. Nobody else's but you. If you were put into a little room all by yourself and you could not ask anybody else for feedback, approval, or disapproval, you only had yourself to talk to, how would you have that conversation with yourself about your own vision of life? Would you be able to put it into words? Would you be able to be inspired by the independence of your own thinking? So how connected are you to your vision, to your own inspiration? How connected are you to your own creative process? Do you let other people tell you, oh, that's really kind of nice, but it's nobody else would really get it? Do you take those types of blows to your ego personally and allow others to crush your creative process? Do you look to others for substantiation of your own ability to be creative? How connected are you to your own creative process of thinking, intending, following through? How connected are you to your own suffering? Do you understand in any given moment, not just right now because you're being reminded, but in any given moment, do you understand what your own suffering is actually all about? Do you understand what parts of it are of your own making, and do you accept the responsibility of that? Are you that connected to your own suffering? In what ways do you feel connected? And in what ways do you not? And if we had a list of 10,000 ways that you could potentially feel connected to your own self, I can guarantee you that 9,999 of those, you feel completely disconnected, and therein lies the anger. Therein lies the anger. The anger is a mask. It is always a mask. And it's a mask that we wear in order to ditch the self-responsibility of connection. Because I can guarantee you, I don't know, there's like 20 of you in this room right now. 20 of you. If you were able to feel the connection of at least two more areas, that beautiful connection of inspiration, or the connection of creativity, or the connection of your soul on a deeper and deeper level, more and more consistently, you would not tolerate half of what you tolerate in your life. You would stop making excuses for a lot of things. You would say no more. This is not healthy for anybody. Do you agree? But you stay, you tolerate. I don't like that word, tolerate. I only like it in certain instances. Like people say we should be a more tolerant nation. No, we shouldn't. We should not be a tolerant nation. We should be a compassionate nation, an empathetic nation, a loving nation, a supportive nation. We should not be a tolerant nation, because when you tolerate, all it means is that you're waiting till the moment where you cannot tolerate it anymore. But when you love, there's no depth that you can meet. You just keep going deeper. When you're compassionate, you just keep going deeper. When you're empathetic, you just keep going deeper. So you would stop tolerating. The deeper your connection is to your own self, the less you tolerate, the BS that comes to you from the outside world, because you see through it. It doesn't mean that you start taking people and tossing them to the side, or situations or jobs. No, first of all, you start to see it for what it is. And when you no longer deny it, when you no longer say to yourself, why does it have to be this way? Which is an answer that can never be answered. It just can't be answered. That whole question is actually not a really great investment of your energy, because it only leads to one question. And the question is, how come I can't have an answer to this question? Would you agree? Absolutely. And that leads to anger, because if something is left unsatisfied. But the thing that is left unsatisfied can never be satisfied. So stop asking yourself those kinds of questions. Why does it have to be this way? Why did that have to happen? And instead, shift to a different question, a question that can be answered. This situation is deeply uncomfortable. What is needed here? What is needed? What can I do that is needed and necessary? And in that, you can find an answer. You can find several answers potentially. You can start to apply answers in a way that empowers a radical self-responsibility, an independence of thought, and a deeper connection with your own ability to have clarity, to think, to analyze, to assess, to resolve, to solve, to apply, to reconcile. But instead, we most often take that sense of disconnection that we carry in life, and we don't turn it inward and say, I have responsibility here. We turn it out and we say, you were a bad mother, a bad father, a bad partner, a bratty child, you were not a loyal friend. We put it out. If only you would be some other way, then I could have a greater connection. And that's BS, 100%. Because your sense of self-connection does not and never will rely upon someone else allowing you to have it. It only depends upon you allowing yourself to have it. No matter how intense or horrifying or sad or depressing or irritating or imbalanced or amazing or fantastical or enjoyable life is, you are the only one who can allow yourself to have that internal connection to yourself. And truly, you always will have access to it. No matter how much you give up on it, you will still always have access to it. The question is, are you going to treat it like the gold that it is, or are you going to throw it away like a crumpled up piece of paper that's of no use to you anymore? We live in a throwaway society, and we do take it to extremes, don't we? So much so we throw away our own connection in favor of someone else's wishes and wants, fantasies and desires. It might sound harsh, but it's not. It might sound radical, and it is. Because we don't live in a world that wants you to accept that responsibility. We don't live in a society that wants you to understand the depth of the connection that you are capable of. We do not exist typically in relationships with individuals who are comfortable with you having that depth of connection, because they're not needed there. They're not needed there. But their ego wants them to be needed. Do you see what I'm saying? Their ego wants them to be needed. Well, you have to tell me that I'm needed here. What do you mean that I'm not needed? No, you're not needed, but you are wanted. You're wanted. I love you because I want to love you. Because I am connected to you, because I have chosen that connection. But I am a strong enough individual to recognize that there may be 20 of you here today And there may be one of you here next Sunday. And I'm okay with that. Because there's a deep internal connection that allows me to continue my work, whether you're here physically or you're out in the world doing your own thing. Does that make sense? Now, when we start to blame others for our own sense of disconnection, we get angry at them. But are we really angry at them? No, we're actually not. It might be a little bit. But so if it was 100%, we would be like angry at them like 5%. Where's the other 95% of anger actually directed to? It's me. Why? For violating myself again, for denying myself again, for turning myself away from myself again. But it's too painful to acknowledge that. So you get 100%. So I turn it to you. And we all do it, every single one of us. And it's uncomfortable. It's an interesting but uncomfortable conversation, because immediately the ego says, but what about? And but what about? And but what about? What about it? Whatever another person does, no matter if they're handing you a rose or a thorn, no matter what society does, whether it's handing you a rose or a thorn, no matter the corruption in the heart of others or the goodness in the heart of others, that has nothing whatsoever to do with the goodness within you and your ability to connect to that goodness out of your own free will. We certainly have empowered ourselves to turn away from it in this life, haven't we? To deny it, to forget it even, to ignore it. Just as easily, and maybe not just as easily, we've trained ourselves, but it could be just as easy, we can turn toward it. We can turn inward. And that's what the initial stages of meditation are really all about, is cultivating the ability to turn inward and to turn away from the exterior, from the external, from that which is outside of the self. By turning away from it, and this is something within the traditions of yoga and Buddhism and others that are similar, I think that there's a little bit of a misunderstanding sometimes, at least on this kind of like first couple of steps that we take into a spiritual sadhana, is some teacher will tell you, turn away from the world. Not one person in this room can do that. I'm sorry, and that includes me. Not one of us can do that. We cannot turn completely away from the world. We live in it. We're here. But what we can do is stop paying such close attention to every little stupid detail that doesn't mean anything. What we can do is turn the television off. Turn the radio down. Turn the mantra up. Turn the sadhana up. What we can do is learn nonviolent communication. What we can do is learn practices that allow us to come into a deeper connection to ourselves, so that that phrase, turn away from the outside world, actually becomes stop giving your power to that which resides outside of yourself. Start feeding yourself. Start nourishing yourself. Start nourishing that connection. And when you do, you're going to go through phases of grief. The first thing that you're going to feel is regret. I should have done this when I was 12. I should have known this when I was 20. If only. But you can't go back to those ages. And however you were and whatever you did at that point in time, even yesterday, was what you did. How you dealt with it. Leave it alone. Learn from it, but leave it alone. And instead, cultivate an intention of connection now moving forward. So now is what matters. What I am doing now. I didn't know then. I didn't know when I was 12. And I didn't know some stuff when I was 20. And I didn't know some stuff at other points in my life. And I didn't know some stuff yesterday. But I do know a little bit more now. I'm grateful for the person that I was then because she got me through some difficult things in whatever way she could. And I've grown and I've learned. And so now I can make this other choice. Now I can connect more deeply with myself. And I can put down the burden of the expectations of the external. I don't have to feed that anymore. At least not as much. That's like the first few steps, is learning that and putting it into place. And what that helps us to do, what it supports, is less anger and more vision. Any of you an artist of any sort whatsoever? Okay. You ever have a moment where you know you want to create something, but it won't come forward? It's frustrating, isn't it? Absolutely. I want to write a song. I want to paint a picture. I want to write a poem. But you try and it's like, oh, darn. And there's frustration there. And we sometimes mistake that frustration for anger. But it's frustration. We feel that we're frustrated. And then all of a sudden that block is lifted, and what happens? Oh, the inspiration flows like the Niagara Falls. It cannot be stopped. It just keeps going and going and going. I was writing like a couple of years ago, I was writing like 5 and 7 poems a day. Like it just wouldn't stop. It's like, I'm like, okay, you know. And now, right now, I'm in a phase where if I get one, I'm lucky, you know. But it's okay because the inspiration is still there. And I know that. It's just that it's being applied towards something else right now. But initially, when we break that wall of being stifled, suddenly there is a sense of resentment. Yes, I should have known this when I was 12. But there's also a flux, an inflow of inspiration. Oh my gosh, this means I could do anything. I could do it, and I could do it, and I can write that. And we start getting a little vata imbalanced because we want to do so much of what we haven't been doing for however many years behind us. And that's a slippery slope too, because that will lead to fatigue, a sense of being tired, a sense of needing to get it all out. But you don't want to get it out when we're talking about connection. You want to get it in. So close the mouth, close the eyes, and sit in stillness. And let it simmer for a little while. Let it be there. Let the connection be baked well. And then when you open your eyes, you'll see that you actually don't need to do anything. You can just be with that connection. And that softens the anger even more. Softens it and softens it and softens it until you start to practice this thing that I personally like to call radical self-responsibility. And I remember when I first started talking about this, I wasn't talking about anybody but myself. You know, because there were definitely points in my life where I was radically irresponsible, completely. And I would think about that because I've always been like, you know, intellectually minded, sit and think about things and write about things and analyze them and analyze myself over and over again. And I said, well, if I went through these phases in my life where I was radically irresponsible, no matter what the influence was that led to that, my own choice was that I was radically irresponsible. I did not accept my own responsibility. Then I have to flip that coin onto the other side and become radically responsible for myself. Radical responsibility. Radical self-responsibility. That means I have to put down my control over you. My need to control what you do, what you say, where you go, how many times you come to class. I have to put that down and say, that is not my concern. My concern is me and how I show up. And that I show up consistently, constantly. And that I'm living my life in such a way that inspires myself. And if it inspires you too, that's wonderful. And I'm very grateful for that. But if I am not inspired by my own life, what am I teaching you? Truly, you know, how to fake it, right? If I am not nourishing myself, what am I teaching? And I don't mean me as a teacher, I mean me as a human being. What am I teaching my children, my grandchildren? We need to be good role models, first to ourselves, and then it extends out. And we'll be honest and authentic role models to all others. When we are not the role model that we deeply know we are capable of being, we experience anger at ourselves. Because we know that we have missed it somehow. We've missed the mark. But we're not going to turn in necessarily unless we are, because of practice and contemplation. We're not going to turn in and say, oh, I really need to correct this about myself. No, we're going to look for a reason. We're going to look for a justification. And say, well, this talk could have gone smoother if that person didn't open the door. The door opening or closing should have nothing whatsoever to do with how I'm presenting this conversation. Would you agree? But if somebody opened the door and suddenly I got all flustered and I got angry with them, you would think that was a little out of balance, right? But don't you all do that every day? Somebody opens or closes a door and you forget who you are. And you say it's your fault. Okay, I know that was a lot. You asked a great question. And it fell right in line because I was thinking I would come in today and talk about connection. That's what we were talking about down in class earlier, right? Connecting with the breath and everything that the breath represents. And we connect with the breath because the breath is just so vital. It's vital. It's evidence of life. It's evidence of presence. It's evidence of being. And yet we don't pay any attention to it. Very little. Your yoga teachers, some of you, I know you pay some attention to it. Your yoga students, I know you pay some attention to it, but you could pay a whole lot more. And the more attention you pay to your breath and to having reverence for that breath, the less you're going to be worrying about what other people are or are not saying, are or are not doing. The ego will spike every once in a while, of course it will. And you know, you'll be maybe adopting a practice of self-awareness, and you'll take time every day, 3, 4, 5, 10 times a day, to just check in with the breath and have reverence for the breath and acknowledge the gift and whatnot. And you'll feel stronger, and you'll feel more powerful, and you'll feel more self-connected. But then the ego will come forward and say, I'm not needed here. Hey, what's that person over there not doing? Make a comment. Have a thought. Go ahead. And it will try to sabotage you. It will try to sabotage you. So yes, those tendencies will still rear themselves up every once in a while. You know, like the well-tamed horse that goes up on its hind legs. We forget. We look at a docile horse and we say, oh my gosh, it's just like a puppy. So sweet and cuddly, and I want to ride that horse. And you get on the horse, you're like, whoa, what happened here, right? So we get complacent like that with our meditations, with our contemplations. We're like, oh, the ego is so soft and not loud anymore. Good. And then it rears up. And you're like, whoa, I forgot how strong you can be. But that's not typically how we respond when the ego rears itself up. For a little while, at least, what we say is, I was peaceful and you irritated me. And there goes all the work. Now we have to start all over again. Come back to step 1. Radical self-responsibility means it doesn't matter what the other person did, said, didn't do, didn't say. What matters is how I'm showing up. How I'm showing up. And without that understanding and the compassion that must accompany it, anger will be our guiding principle in life. And we'll use that word anger as an umbrella term. We'll shove a lot of stuff under that umbrella. It'll be like 27 people trying to fit under a tiny little umbrella in a rainstorm. You know, frustration will be there. Grief will be there. Impatience will be there. So many other emotions will be there. And instead of acknowledging those emotions for the emotions that they are and what they represent, we'll call them anger. Hurt will be there. Disappointment will be there. How many times have you been disappointed and called it anger? How many times have you felt hurt and called it anger? How many times have you felt grief, did not want to feel weak or appear weak, so you called it anger? We do that. We do the same thing with love. It's either anger or it's love. And we have this umbrella of love, and we put, 27 emotions under that umbrella. Some of those emotions are lust, envy, and we put them under that umbrella. Attraction. We see a person and we're like, oh, I love. No, you don't. No, you lust. That is not love. Does that all? Yeah? The giggles are telling me that it's coming through clear. Questions or reflections so far? Follow-up question. Yes?
I don't know how to phrase this correctly, but the point when you acknowledge I used to react like this, and I feel connected to myself, and I now react like this, and it's like, wow, I no longer feel that intensity, that fun intensity of being in an argument or anger or something like that, and I'm now in a different place. I don't really know if this is a question or a statement, but it's just a very different place to be in.
It's a very, very different place to be. Absolutely. You ever watch a dog chase its tail? That's the other place. Mm-hmm. And you ever see a dog just lie down and relax? That's the new place. So it's the difference between these two places. We're either chasing after something. Give me that, give me that, give me that, give me that, give me that. And it's always out of our reach. Or we're settling into the moment and the peace that is guaranteed that exists within us. It's guaranteed. And to say that is not to diminish the hurt, the pain, the suffering, the trauma that anybody has had in their life. It's not to say that. It's to say that in spite of those things, you are capable of peace. And I won't accept anything less than that for myself. Because if I say to myself, because of the way my life has gone, I am not capable of peace, what am I left with? What am I left with? No. I don't like that. I don't want it. I'm not interested in it. I will not give away my power that way. No matter what life has brought me, no matter what it brings me, I am capable of peace, and I know I am. Absolutely 100%. I have to be. It doesn't mean that I don't have moments where I'm like, this is a lot, because we all have those moments. But the moment that I say to myself, this is a lot, is the moment that I sit down, close my eyes, and start breathing. And saying, okay, yes, this is a lot. Now, what's needed? What's needed? Scientific research said that human beings spend at least 70% of their waking hours worrying about things that will never happen.
That's so sad.
Imagine that. 70% of your waking hours. So that means that if you are awake for 10 hours a day, let's just say, 7 of those hours consistent worry about things that will never happen. And then we look back and say, I don't feel I've lived my life. Well, you were embedded in worry for 70% of it, at least. Some people as high as 90%. So that's going to lend itself to anger also. And to a sense of chasing one's own tail in order to try to find, to try to get, to try to grasp a hold of the thing that you think is going to fix you. But there's nothing outside of you that's going to fix you. Nothing. Not a car, not a dress, not a shopping spree, not a vacation, not a partner, not a child, not a parent, not a friend. There's nothing outside of yourself, not even a doctor, not a teacher, There's no one outside of yourself that is going to cure you. You're the only one with that medicine. You're the only one who can stop chasing your tail. That's it. It's you. Now, of course, you can do things to support yourself. Of course you can. You learn how to sit still. You learn how to sit down. You learn how to be in a moment. Yin is so great for that, isn't it? That yin yoga practice. It really is. You learn how to be with the discomfort, with the impatience. You learn how to name it also. Stop calling it anger if it's not anger. If it's hurt, call it hurt. I feel hurt. I feel hurt. Well, if you feel hurt, then have you explored that feeling? I don't want to. It's uncomfortable. I don't like feeling hurt. I don't want to feel hurt. I felt hurt too much in my life. Well, if you felt hurt too much in your life, then you have to look at it. If you don't look at it, then how will you ever make different choices? How will you ever come to understand where it's coming from if you refuse to look at it and lump it under anger? And the same thing for all of the other emotions. If it's truly anger, if it's truly this fire that's building up in you that is reactive anger, then you also need to look at that and understand that there's still a mix of other emotions going on there. And you ever have one of those really fine little necklaces that you tossed in your jewelry drawer, and then you were like, oh my gosh, I really want to wear that necklace with this outfit. And so you go to get it, and it's that fine necklace knots, right? And you sit there and look at it, and you're like, oh my God. And you try to get the tweezers out and try pulling it apart, and right? Or like, have you ever brushed a little child's hair when they have knots in it? And you try to work through the knots without it being too painful? Well, first of all, it's going to be painful to work through the knots. You just need to accept it. You can still try to minimize the pain, but the pain's going to be there. But the tediousness of pulling each little strand apart from the others, or working to finally take those little knots in the necklace apart, that's what you need to do with your anger, is look at it and see how many strands of emotions are there, and then start pulling them apart so that you can look at them, address them, honor them. You're not taking them apart so you can then throw them away. That's ridiculous. That's not going to serve the purpose of internal connection. Throwing away, hiding from, disguising how you feel is not honoring yourself. Take the strands apart. Look at each one as best you can and honor what is found there. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of sadness. There's a lot of unaddressed grief, a lot of fear, a lot of blame, a lot of disappointment, a lot of frustration, a lot of stifled creativity, a lot of doubt. And that's a lot. It's a lot. But if you pretend it's not there, you're only going to serve yourself more. It's when you look at it, start taking it apart, and honor, yeah, I have been hurt a lot in this life. I have felt deep, deep pangs of hurt and loss. And maybe I haven't cried. Maybe I haven't allowed myself to really feel the loss. I covered it over for the sake of everyone else. That's blame, by the way. That's saying, if y'all weren't here, I could cry. So it's your fault somehow. But it's not. The responsibility rests with me being able to cry, to let out my own pangs of suffering. And I promised myself, when my husband passed, I promised myself that I would not stifle my own pain. That I would sit with it and I would feel it, that it would be raw and I knew it, but I was going to accept it. And so I did. And it was the most crazy, intense, amazing, weird, odd, healing. You put the word there. It probably was every kind of experience possible. I said, I will not rush my grief based on what society tells me. And I will not lump my grief into depression. Of course there's depression that comes with grief. There's depression that comes with any kind of loss. But that is a natural, normal depression that you feel when you have had a loss. So sometimes if I get stubborn and I say to myself, no, you have too much to do right now, I will get in my car and I will drive down to the park and I will sit there and I will put a certain song on the radio, which I know opens the floodgates. And I will have myself a little bit of a time. And no, that's not self-pity. It's actually, controlling my own energy. Letting the floodgates open as they need to in order to process through what needs to be processed. Anybody in here ever been constipated? There you go. It's just a different kind. So being able to process through. So you untie that knot in little pieces at a time, or if you're really bold and, you're up for the challenge, a lot of pieces at a time, and then you address what you find. And in addressing what you find, it creates connection because you're no longer denying yourself. You don't go running off to somebody else and say, Kathy, guess what I found out about our relationship? Right? Because that's as good as blame. Because you don't know what that other person is thinking, expecting, hoping for. You don't know where they are with their knots. You don't know. So you don't go running to somebody and saying, I found out what's wrong with us. I found out what's wrong with you. Don't do that. If you're going to have that conversation with someone, then you could try words somewhere along this line. Right now I find myself in a place of deep contemplation in my life. Lots of thoughts, ideas, and impressions are coming up. And I'm trying to address those as best I can. And there are some areas where I might ask your permission to share. But if I were to ask your permission to share, then I would also ask you to realize that what I'm sharing is not meant to be personal to you. I'm not going to look at Sharon and say, this is for you. Or Kim and say, this is for you. This is for me. Even if this discovery is grounded within the context of our relationship, it is still first and foremost me. See the difference? It's a big difference. It's a big responsibility, isn't it? Like, how many of you feel ready for that responsibility? Right. So, what is not in abundance in yourself that allows you to say, I don't feel quite ready for that responsibility? Any ideas? Courage. Confidence.
I was going to say
faith. Faith. There you go. That's why I looked at you. Faith, which is courage and confidence and so many other things, right? Faith. So you all know that, and I commend each and every one of you for saying, because it's important to acknowledge that, don't you think? It's important to acknowledge that. I mean, certainly, I would not want a surgeon to come and do an operation on me if they didn't feel that they were ready to be operating on somebody, right? Like, you don't want that. I don't want the dentist drilling on my teeth if they don't feel like they're confident with the drill. No, not at all. So pat yourself on the back and say, yay for honesty. Yay for honesty. Honesty is empowering, even if it's painful. It's empowering. Because now you know. The first step you actually need to take is to build faith. Confidence. Courage. In yourself. Not in how someone else is going to receive you. Because you have zero control over that. Great reflection and great initial question. Other questions or reflections? Yes, Aslan.
I'll share a story that happened this past week at work. So pretty consistently, my boss will say that he's coming over to the farm, and then never does. But I will stress out about that, him coming and making sure everything's right. And this past Friday or Thursday, he said he was coming over, and I was like, okay, whatever, he's not going to show up. And of course, on Friday, he did. And my first reaction was, oh man, I didn't have time to stress about him coming. And then I was angry at him for coming. And it's like you said earlier about you stress out about the things that never happened. And in hindsight, I was like, wow, all that creative energy I had available because I wasn't stressing, and then once he was there, it was fine, and it was fine anyway, but it just seemed really relevant to the conversation today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I think can everybody identify with that to some in some way, shape, or form? The pain and suffering we cause ourselves is just it's intense. It really is. And why do we do that? And I know that this is not going to be a popular answer. You'll all understand it, I'm certain. That you're addicted to drama. We're all addicted to drama. Yeah. It's an addiction to drama. It is.
It's like, how am I mad at him?
Right. And why be stressed out when he's coming? Do you not have confidence in your own work ethic? Do you not have faith in your own ability to adequately and with great skill run the farm? You on one level intellectually, you know that you can do it. You know that you are doing it. You know you're beyond capable of doing it. But on the other hand, there's what the outside world might say. And what we've been brainwashed to think about that. Well, now I have to run around and I really have to run all my energy so that instead of meeting him with energy here, eye to eye, I meet him with energy here. So run down, so tired, so whatever it happens to be. Yeah, and then you didn't have a chance to do that. So you had to meet him face to face. I remember when I was in graduate school one time, it was very interesting actually. I don't do it very often, and I haven't done it in a really long time. But back in the day, I would have my tarot cards read by a certain person, not just anybody. But this person was truly intuitive. And I was in graduate school, and I was having an issue because I'm deeply spiritual, and I always have been deeply spiritual, and I'm deeply connected to my creative mind, and I always have been. And to some people, that might make me seem a little, flighty or crazy or whatever. But I'm also deeply connected to my intellectual mind. I'm also deeply intellectual and analytical and critical in that kind of way. We're looking for the patterns and whatnot. And so I'm in graduate school, which I'm in a hard science. It's anthropology's branch of archaeology, which is based in a harder science, but I'm also osteology, which is definitely a hard science, biological archaeology. And I remember being in graduate school and having this internal conflict because I'm a yoga teacher and I'm a spiritual teacher and I'm a scientist. And I understood the bridge that could be between those places, absolutely 100%. But they didn't. And because they didn't, it made me doubt myself and the way that I was showing up. So I started to feel like I was one person outside of my department and I was another person inside of my department. And every once in a while, those people in the department who were like my not my direct advisor, because he was cool, but the others who were like my secondary advisors, every once in a while they would say something to me. Like, have you gotten rid of that other stuff yet? Yeah. So, or if I wore like a ring that had a crystal on it or something, they would like be a bit mocking about it, you know, and I would get into my fierce mode, and you know. So at any rate, so I'm in graduate school during this time frame where I was having this struggle, which was probably like all of it, but it was definitely the year before my defense, right? So that particular year. And it was probably the added stress of the defense also and having to prepare for that. So I have my cards read, and this woman, I swear, I love her to death. She's so straight on. She pulls the card. I believe that it's the 10 of Wands, which is the bound. So it's a person who is bound to a wand. Their mouth is bound. Their arms are bound. And she looks at it and she says, you feel so bound right now. Like you cannot be who you are. You cannot connect to your deeper calling in this moment because you're too worried about the things outside of yourself. Like, she's not a yogi, okay? She's and she's not like one of those TV personalities either. She was a friend of mine who did this and was very, very good at it. And she said, you feel like you're being pulled into two directions. And I never talked to her about this. Never, not once. But there it was in the card. She said, on one part of you feels like you're living a lie. And the other part of you feels like you're living a truth. You're feeding too much into the lie. Get rid of it. Or, next card, there's more suffering. Yeah. So guess what I did? I changed. Yeah. I said, okay, message received, you know, because messages come to us in all kinds of different ways. And I'm not one for all of the woo-woo that's out there in the world right now. I really do strongly feel that probably 98% of the people who tell you they can tell you something can't tell you anything. But I do believe that there's also a very small percentage of people who are quite insightful and intuitive. And if you're fortunate enough to come across one of them, you should absolutely have a conversation and listen consciously. So I started making some changes. And as I would go in to the university, I would just be me, more and more me. And if somebody said something to me, you know, one of those higher ups, I would just be like, what can I say? This is me. If you don't enjoy the conversation, then whatever, you know, you're responsible for my grades and my passing. I know that. You know, is there something wrong with my research? Is the way that I feel about life and the way that I live my life invalidating my research? I mean, you keep telling me what a brilliant scientist I am. And they're like, no, it's perfectly fine. Your research is absolutely fantastic. You know? So there comes a connection the moment you stand into your own 2 feet. The moment that you look at yourself and say, where am I pretending in my life or denying or just hiding? Where am I wearing a mask to make others happy? Isn't it time to take the mask off? Time to just be who you are. It's empowering when you do that. But there's a very important adjunct there. And that is this. When you take the mask off, don't do it in anger. Don't do it and blame them for ever having worn it. Because if I took that mask off and said, I'm taking this mask off to show you who I am, well, that's a bunch of BS. Further suffering, right? Because that's just another mask. That's because society has taught you and me and everybody else, you know, you got to be reactionary. You don't need to be reactionary. Just take off the mask. Just take it off. Hang it up on the wall and be like, I remember those times. Yeah. Let it collect some dust. And continue on with less of a disguise and more of your authentic self. Anger can be a mask too, right? So if the umbrella wasn't, you know, impactful enough, anger is often the mask we wear because we don't want to show people we're vulnerable. So I'll show them I'm angry. I'll show them I'm angry. I'll show them how strong I am. My anger burns like rage. This way they don't know how sad and weak and upset and sorrowful and broken I feel. So I'll just come across as a lion, a raging, rabid animal, right? I'll come across as that and let them know, you can't hurt me anymore. And in that moment, you're putting daggers in your own heart. And they're putting daggers in their own heart. Because whoever they are not different from you. They have the same exact challenge that you have. They are lost in the same exact way that you are. The details are different. But the loss, the shame, the blame, the anger, all of that, the suffering is the same. So don't take your mask off in an angry reaction and think that that's somehow your more authentic self. You all know that that's like really a big thing in the world today, right? It's like all these people, taking off my mask, I'm going to tell you who I am. As long as you feel you have to tell somebody else anything about who you are, you're not telling yourself anything except another fallacy, another incomplete truth. Who was it? Al Gore had the inconvenient truth. We have the great movie called The Incomplete Truth. Yeah. Pretty intense, right? Questions or reflections?
I just want to say thank you, Swamini, for that. And it really did, that connection piece really spoke to me, because one of the things that comes up for me a lot is that anger around like abandoning myself to care, right? I'm a caretaker, I'm a nurturer, I'm all those things. And so but it's my choice. I choose. That's that radical responsibility. I choose to abandon myself to take care. And then I'm like angry and grumpy and agitated with everybody else. Why are you coming to watch me? It's so hard. It's so hard. And, I can sit every morning and I can think, and have these practices, and then like moving it into the world and moving it into, into partnership and work and all these places, I forget to choose, and I abandon myself over and over and over again.
And sometimes, and I really appreciate what you're saying, and thank you so much for sharing. Sometimes the idea is a fantasy. That we sit there and we have made a choice. For example, when my husband was sick, I made the active choice to be his caregiver. Period. 24/7. That was it. And of course there were moments where it was like, I just really wish we could go out to dinner again, or go do this again, or go for a hike again. We have this fantasy idea that what we are currently engaged in, especially in caregiving, is somehow less valuable than the excitement of a candlelit dinner at a fancy restaurant, or a hike up a mountain, or even just someone having the energy to laugh at your jokes. We think somehow in the egoic part of the mind that the caregiving is somehow less valuable, less substantial than me getting what I want from you. So we have to right-size that. And when those thoughts come forward, first of all, we need to understand, am I really genuinely talking about self-care here? And if you are, take the steps necessary in order to empower self-care, 100%. You have to do that. It's just, or you're going to get run down. And then when the other thoughts come that have a little tad bit of resentment attached to them, a little tad bit of disappointment, then look at those and say, is this my heart talking, or is this my ego? And if it's the ego talking, then have a conversation with your ego and say, I know you're pretty tricky. I know that sometimes you think you're pretty wise. But the reality is, the choice that I have made is my choice. It's my choice. And what you're offering me is conflicting to the importance of the choice that I've made. So if the ego is saying, well, you should be angry because there's not candlelight dinners right now. And you say, this is not the time for candlelight dinners. This is not the time for that. It's not time for, hikes up the mountain or for this to happen or that to happen. You have a baby, right? Dayananda and Brahmani have a beautiful little baby. Now is not the time for them to be traversing around the world. Now is not the time. Because they're caregivers to the baby. Now is the time for the baby. That is the choice that they have made. And it is a valid, authentic, beautiful choice. Now, there's, of course, there also needs to be a choice with regard to self-care. You need to get sleep. You need time for your practice. And don't say that the baby won't let me. Because the baby sleeps.
The baby sleeps upright in a carrier while she's on top of me.
Then in those moments, find yourself a comfy couch, like the one you're on right now.
I need to find something that holds me vertically, like what they have in this movie.
Yeah. But it's doable, is it not? Sort of, maybe, kind of, right?
Can I sleep in the yoga wall room?
100%. Absolutely. We have dormitories, Dayananda. So go get a 15-minute nap with the baby. The baby's sleeping. She ain't stopping you from doing anything. Right? Yes.
What do we do if it is the heart talking?
If it is the heart talking, then you listen. Then you listen. How do you know the difference, though? Uh-huh. If it's whiny, it's not your heart. If it's poor me, it's not your heart. If it's you're doing this to me, it's not your heart. If it's you do need to take good care of yourself because you're tired, and you retaliate with, I don't want to hear that. That's your heart. Your heart is saying what you need. It says, you're tired, you need more sleep. And you need more sleep because, you're walking through your day with a lot of fatigue. Maybe you're not as clear as you typically would be. Maybe you're more quick to anger than you typically would be. So you list all of the reasons out for yourself. And that self-responsibility is your heart. The heart will never put blame on somebody else. The heart will never say, this is your fault. The ego will say, I'm tired of you hurting me. The heart will say, I have allowed myself to be hurt enough. Two different statements. Now, I could feel some of you cringe when I said that. I have allowed myself to be hurt enough. What happened to radical self-responsibility? Where'd that go? Because the reality is, are you not in control of your own thoughts? Are you not in control of your own intentions? Do you not have the ability to make a different choice? Of course you do. Absolutely you do. There's very rare circumstances that you don't. But even in those circumstances where you don't have the ability to make one other choice in a particular category, you still always have the ability to choose how you show up. How you show up to your own pain and suffering. How you show up to your own needs. How you show up to the ways that you're being exploited. To the ways that other people are inflicting harm on you. Because of course other people inflict harm all the time. They do. We can't deny that. It's the truth. It's just the truth. The truth is, humans can be greatly loving and they can be miserable. Miserable. Miserable inflictors of pain and suffering. And that's just the truth. How do you show up to that? So when your heart tells you how you show up and what you need in order to show up in a more honest representation of your own true self, that's your heart. And everything else is your ego. To be continued. We've gone over a little bit. So let's sit tall and close the eyes. And draw the hands together in front of the heart. And just take a moment to intend. Intend for the self-realization of all beings, particularly humans. Animals don't really need it so much. But may all beings everywhere come into self-realization, self-knowledge, and self-responsibility. May we blame less and deepen our own courage and compassion. May we look outside less and turn inward more. May we be bolder in our love, more courageous in our empathy, and more steadfast in the deeper truth of ourselves. Let's lift our voices in one Om, taking a breath in. Om Shri Matre Namaha. Thank you all so much for being here today. So wonderful to sit and gather with you, have these beautiful conversations. Such a blessing. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.